It's a mini. It's a mini. Oubliette Minisodes.
Okay, hello everyone. It's Conrad here for the second of our bonus episodes on my experiences at TIFF. And again, I am joined by...
Hello, it's still Joe Libs, and I'm still bothering you all.
No, it's wonderful. We wouldn't be anywhere without you. So, our first episode focused on a whole brace of body horrors because there were so many of them. This time we're going to talk about the other horror movies that we've seen at the festival. Quite a few good ones to pick from. The very first one, which you haven't seen yet.
Not yet.
So you're just going to have to quiz me on this one.
Okay.
Was Went Up the Hill, which is directed by Samuel van Grinsven. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he is from New Zealand.
Oh, really? Okay. For some reason, I didn't think that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a New Zealand film, and I wanted to see it because I really enjoyed his first film, Sequin in a Blue Room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is LGBTQ erotic thriller, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of fever dreamy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this very much has that sort of sense about it as well. And there is some queer representation in there too, because it focuses on a queer couple, one of them played by Vicky Creeps. Is that how you pronounce her
I
surname?
believe so.
Yeah. So Vicky Creeps is just lost her wife, who is an artist, and her dead wife's son is arriving, and he's played by Dacre Montgomery
Okay.
from Stranger Things.
Yes.
The lifeguard.
Season 3.
Yeah. So he is arriving at the funeral of his mother, who he's never really had a relationship with. They were separated when he was very, very young. He doesn't exactly know why. So there are a lot of family secrets there. It's quite clear that the rest of the family doesn't want him to be at the funeral.
Oh,
And even more alarming, it's not clear who actually invited him, because he believes he was invited by Vicky Creep's character, Jill, but she has no memory of inviting him.
Okay. So is this a mystery movie?
Somewhat, yes. It's sort of one of those movies where as it progresses, you learn more about the characters' backstories, and therefore it fills in the blanks on why they are behaving the way that they are behaving, and why they have become the people that they have become.
Okay. So this is a bit of a soft genre film then, because what I've gathered is that it's a little stately. Like this, it sounds a bit slower, maybe a little bit moodier.
It is, yeah, and it benefits from being shot in New Zealand in winter, so it's very much the sort of glacial, frosty, almost Scandi-noir sort of landscape that you're set in, so it's very slow. They are staying in for the wake. They are staying in this home that was designed and built by the artist. And again, sound design, I noticed. I do pay attention, Dan. You keep hearing all of these creaking and groaning wood noises in the wind as the wood is cooling and expanding or contracting or what have you. So it very much feels like these two characters are trapped inside the belly of a beast, slowly being consumed by the grief this character has left behind.
Right.
And what happens is it's a ghost story, essentially.
Okay.
Because the two main characters, Jack and Jill,
Oh, no.
went up the hill.
No.
Yes, I know. I did groan in the theatre when I realised that. Jack and Jill, the son and the wife, discover that when they go to sleep at night, one or both of them at some point during the evening will be possessed by the spirit of the dead woman, the artist.
Oh, interesting. And of course, they have very different types of relationships with her. So do they know what's happening when they're being possessed, or have they completely forgotten it when they wake up?
They have no idea. But in some cases, when they wake up in the morning, they get a sense of what might have happened the night before. And this can be disturbing to them for all kinds of reasons. So we're entering into sort of birth territory.
Oh.
Jonathan Glazer, 2004, 20 years ago. I was shocked when I saw that.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting into that sort of territory. There's a point at which, because there is some malevolence in what's going on, maybe a sense of wanting to seize control of a body and be alive again.
Oh.
So there starts to get a feeling of we're afraid to go asleep. So we're in sort of Freddy Krueger territory, but again, very much shot through with this very stately, as you say, slow, moody, quiet, Scandi noir setting. And in terms of, just to give you a sense of the tone of the movie, the soundtrack in particular, I noticed the score is by a composer called Hernan Townsend, who I believe worked with Terence Malick on things like Tree of Life.
Okay.
So it's a score entirely composed of human voices, whispering and moaning.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being very effective for what you've described.
Oh, it is, yeah. I was really taken up by the atmosphere of the movie. Some of it feels a little bit mannered.
Okay.
There are moments where it feels like that every time the possession ends, both of them fall over and pass out, and it starts to look like interpretive dance in slow motion or a Kate Bush music video.
Right.
It gets a little bit too self-serious in places, and personally, I felt as though it had two climaxes.
Okay.
And I was kind of done after the first one, and it kind of felt like the second one was a repeat of the first one, although I understand they needed to give both characters an emotional resolution.
Of course.
To the issues that they were trying to address, which content warning touches on self-harm and domestic abuse.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you're not quite as high on this title as you were with others, but it sounds like you enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it, yeah. And in particular, I found I was emotionally involved in it because there is a scene where Dacre Montgomery confronts his mother about being abandoned.
Oh.
And it got me.
Okay.
I thought, ooh, Dacre Montgomery can act.
That's interesting because, I mean, he's obviously a very pretty face, but I've not seen him in any kind of meaty, dramatic performances before.
No, I haven't. And this was definitely, the clip that you would use in your Oscar nomination reel.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was very, very good. And Vicky Krieps was very good at sort of...
Well, of course.
Mysterious and cold.
Yeah.
I think she kind of excels at that kind of thing anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I enjoyed it. That was my very first movie of the festival at like 8:45 in the morning or something.
Okay. Just when you want a mannered ghost story.
Yeah. But I had my coffee. I can't see it getting a huge release, but I enjoyed it. I think it's well worth seeking out if that sort of mood takes you.
Nice.
Very different film, and one that you can contribute to. Dead Talent Society.
Yeah. So this is a film from Taiwan by John Su, and he previously did Detention, which I had not seen. So this is not Detention from another filmmaker that we're going to talk about in a couple moments. Detention is a video game adaptation. And it seemed like some people liked it, some people didn't, but we're carrying over the lead actress. But yeah, Dead Talent Society is interesting. I've seen people describe it as a kind of Beetlejuice-esque story. So it concerns a main character called the Rookie, who is sort of newly dead, and she and her best friend Camilla are trying to negotiate the ghost world, and you basically have to survive by becoming popular in the afterlife. So if you don't want to disappear in 30 days, you need people to remember you, and the best way to do that is to go viral on social media by scaring people.
Yeah.
So it's a very outlandish premise, but the film has this just really deep bench perspective on how the world works, what the rules are. It's very fun. It's very fast-paced moving. It's almost like a heist film in a couple of different parts. And surprisingly, not just funny, but very gory. Like, there's moments of genuine horror in this film.
There are, yeah, but the audience was really into it. I mean, I was in a public screening for this one.
Okay.
But yet it went down a storm. It is very high energy. It is very funny. It's full of lots of lovely details, like the tradition of family members burning items for you to have in the afterlife, and them actually showing up
Yeah.
So the characters are complaining about the fact that they haven't got any food recently, and people competing for haunting licenses
Yeah.
and bickering over their favorite haunting spots. So it's full of lots of lovely details that make you want to know more about this
Oh, yes.
afterlife world that they're inhabiting, but it goes at such a breakneck pace, and it is full of such gothic glee
Yeah.
that you kind of just get swept along with it and just accept these light brush strokes that sort of color the world around the main characters.
Yeah, there's enough detail that you feel like you understand, but that you would welcome more. Like, if I heard that this film was getting a sequel, I would be the first person in line, because not to give anything away, but this is my favorite film of the festival.
Right.
And I think it's just because it is doing everything so well and it feels so effortless. And like it's a creative triumph in terms of just how it's visually executing all of these things. But yeah, I love spending time in this world. And it's got a lot of heart. Like at its base, it's really about this girl trying to find her way through a new space and feeling like she hasn't accomplished anything. Like there's this recurring motif where she goes to see her parents who are slowly forgetting her. And that's why she has to get the haunting license and get a big scare, or else she will disappear and die a second time. But in terms of true Chinese culture, you know, the expectation on this girl was that she was going to be something exceptional. So there's a trophy case that the family has with a designated slot for her accomplishments, which she never accomplished in real life. So her whole afterlife is being driven by this idea that she still wants to make her family proud. And the movie ultimately becomes a kind of ode to found family, which queer people relate to very strongly. But it's got such a great amount of heart, but then you also get, as you said, swept up in these people just running around, getting involved in madcap heists and activities. And the movie is so quick and well edited, and those comedic punches are just coming all the time. Like it's just a really, really enjoyable film to watch.
Yeah, especially for a genre fan, because it is so much in conversation with the genre, just talking about the mechanics of setting up scares, just watching this group of ghosts engineer behind the scenes how they're going to escalate until this final scare point, this moment that will make it go viral.
Yeah.
And just complaining about the fact that movies and social media have really made it difficult for them to compete, and how apathetic and tired the audience is getting. So you've got these jaded Zoomers who are still filming with their mobile phones while they're screaming at the scare that's happening in front of them. So it's very much the deconstruction of the genre is very playful with horror movie tropes as well.
But we're still paying homage to them. Like one of the most successful ghosts has gone viral effectively because she recreated The Ring. And her costuming in the film is tantamount to the main character from Perfect Blue. So like this is a creative who knows about the genre, who is poking fun at it. The scathing critique of influencer culture in this movie feels so timely and relevant, particularly to someone who is getting impatient with influencers and influencer culture. I mean, maybe that just says more about me than it does about the film, but I like that the film had a point of view, but it was doing it in, as you said, that playful way.
Yeah, it's very loving at the same time. So it's not filled with the anger that you find in The Substance, for example. No, I was fortunate enough because I was in a public screening. John Su was there with his lead actor, Jingle Wang. And it was lovely to see them. And he told this really good story about the genesis of the film. He was watching one of many J horror movies.
Right.
Because he's a huge fan. And he suddenly had this moment where he saw this, woman in white with long dark hair crawling awkwardly through a public toilet that was covered in filth, trying to execute a scare. It's supposed to be a scary moment, and he wasn't scared because he'd seen it dozens of times before and thought it was kind of tired. So instead what he experienced was this odd kind of empathy for the ghost, and finally just concluded, this must be the shittiest job in the world. That you have to do this. Look at this environment. Look at what you're physically having to do. This can't be fun. And that was the the germ of the idea for him was,
Right.
what is that like doing that?
Yeah.
So it eventually turned into his elevator pitch was Monsters Inc., but with ghosts,
Right.
with
Yeah.
J-horror ghosts.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what
It
it is.
is. Yeah.
And it's very personal. As you said, it's full of heart, but it comes from a very personal perspective for him because despite his first film being so successful, he and Jingle both said that they felt imposter syndrome, that they didn't feel as though they deserved their sudden
Right.
fame because he was that main character and his family does have the awards display case with a shelf on it.
Oh, no.
And his shelf is empty. So if he wins the People's Choice Award here at TIFF, they were joking that he would finally have something to put on that display case.
Oh my gosh. High stakes. High stakes.
Indeed. Yeah, I think that's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah.
I think ultimately my favorite is The Substance, but you saw that before you came to TIFF, I think.
I did. Yeah.
But this was definitely another favorite. It was a really good time. So that's our two ghost movies. Should we do Heretic?
Sure.
So Hugh Grant in a creepy puzzle box of a movie. The central premise is that they're Latter-day Saints, aren't they?
Yes, they're Mormons.
They're
yeah.
Mormons, yeah. So they are on their mission, which is where they have to go and spread the good word. Played by Sophie Thatcher, who plays Barnes, Sister Barnes. I think she's from Yellow Jackets, which I haven't seen.
She is, yeah.
Yeah. She's the makeup artist in Maxine as well.
Yes.
But that's just a
brief.
single scene. Yeah. And Chloe East, who plays Sister Paxton. They show up at Hugh Grant's house. He's very charming. He's very British. He invites them in to tell him about Jesus.
Yeah, finding your savior. And of course, they're not meant to go in alone because as Mormons, there should always be a woman present along with a man. And he reassures them that his wife is in the kitchen baking a blueberry pie and they can just come in. And then, of course, the locks go in and we can't find a way to open the door. And what's interesting is that if you watch the trailer for this film, this is by Beck and Woods. So they're responsible for things like the Adam Driver dinosaur movie 65. They wrote the screenplay for A Quiet Place, the first film. So they're pretty accomplished horror writer-directors. And I think that this film has a great sense of style in terms of its production design, the way that they're using the camera to create a lot of movement and feeling because it's all set in Hugh Grant's house. But at the end of the day, this is a religious dogma film.
Yeah, it's a philosophical debate.
Yeah.
He's essentially testing them and their beliefs through what amounts to sort of a labyrinth of puzzles, very much like the labyrinth. At one point,
quite literally.
yeah, he presents them with two doors. You know, do you want to go through the left door or the right door? Yeah. The first thing to focus on is Q.
Yes.
He hasn't been in a horror film since Lair of the White Worm, which
I love that you have that just in your back pocket.
yes, which we did on the podcast, and we enjoyed it very much. This is his first time playing a villainous role in a horror movie, though, although he has been a very good villain in things like the Paddington movie, the sequel. And I think this is the horror movie role he was born to play because he is intellectually very astute. He is incredibly articulate in his arguments. There's a lot of religious dogma and philosophy to get through, and he delivers it with such aplomb and keeps you engaged. He's charming, he's witty, he's funny, he's putting in
so funny.
Yeah, little modern references and so on, and callbacks to previous scenes. He really is sort of the showman that's keeping this magic trick of a movie humming along.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be impossible for people to walk away from this film not praising him. I do think you'd be remiss not to recognize the two women, though, because really, if you don't care about what happens to them, the whole film ultimately falls apart. And we can have a discussion about whether or not we feel this is an ultimately successful film. I think you saw this in a different screening than me, but you mentioned that you could immediately imagine this as a stage production. And I think in some ways that's a bit of a compliment. And I think to a lot of people, that's going to be something of a detraction.
Yeah, I think it would be. I actually don't think that it's a bad thing to do a movie adaptation of a stage play or vice versa. I think it's a fine thing. They're very different art forms. But I could see this being, because it's a locked room drama.
Yeah.
And so it entirely hinges on the performances. And yes, if you had nothing to play against, then it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And both Barnes and Paxton are engaging characters. Is it too much of a spoiler for me to say that it goes in surprising directions in terms of those two characters? I don't want to say too much in case people haven't seen it.
I think we dance around it, but yeah, the film doesn't always do what you expect. I would argue that it too early telegraphs that that's the case. So when something happens, I thought, oh, okay, well, I anticipated that you weren't going to do the thing I thought you were going to do, which is maybe too much of a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I found that maybe that's actually my ultimate problem with the film. I did enjoy it, but I think it's a little pedantic in terms of it really just wants to sermonize at you about the deficiencies in all contemporary religions. And there's something fun and playful about the way that Hugh Grant's character dissects that and tests these girls. But at the same time, it is a lot of speechifying and it's very little action. So for traditional horror purists, they're going to look at this and say, nothing happens in this movie.
Yeah.
And I would argue ultimately the outcome isn't overly surprising. So it's not as though it's breaking too much new ground. So it really does, in my mind, live and die on those three performances, as well as how good Beck and Woods are at making this not feel too stagey.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I do think it runs out of steam.
Yeah, it's too long.
It's too long. I got a little bit bored in the middle section. I think it's a fantastic premise. I think the first act is absolutely thrilling.
Oh, fantastic.
And I think once it gets beyond that, I thought it was sort of diminishing returns as it kept testing and expanding its central premise.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it landed somewhere that I thought was a little bit twee.
Yeah, I don't think the ending is quite satisfying enough for me, and not as a bit of a payoff for those meandering last two acts.
Yeah.
Still, it's never not entertaining, but I think it could have either pushed it further and maybe been a bit more excitable, or could have really tried something different, and it sort of settled for, I'm going to say, a bit of a safe ending.
Yeah, I think so. Still, I enjoyed it
I
very
enjoyed
much.
it, yeah.
I wouldn't say it isn't like a scary horror film.
No.
It's engaging.
Yeah.
It's a thinker.
It's a thinker. Do I think that I will still be talking about this at the end of the year? I'm not sure. No, I'm really not sure about that.
No.
Maybe for Hugh Grant's performance.
Maybe. And I think this was the screening that I walked out of this screening, and as I was walking through Scotiabank, I passed Brandon Cronenberg lining up for another screening.
Okay.
I didn't say anything to him. No. And then when I got outside, I was asked if I could just stay still for a second. And I thought, why? And it turned out that Denis Villeneuve needed to go past me to get into his car that was waiting.
And look at you, hobnobbing with all of the famous Canadian directors.
I know. So that was quite the morning for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I did sort of message my friends and say, #typical TIFF Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah, it is quite fun wandering around here and bumping into people. I think you saw Brandon Cronenberg on the street, didn't you?
I did,
in the wild?
yes. And the weirdest thing is, I mean, probably not at all surprising to anyone who has ever encountered anyone famous, but they really do just look like us. It's not, they're maybe getting some special treatment because they've got a car waiting for them and we need to hold the line. But apart from that, they're just regular folks walking around in the movie theater.
Yeah, no, it's been fun for that. Just not knowing who you might bump into.
Right.
So our last film, after we've done 2 Ghosts and 1 Hugh Grant, is a 50s monster movie, or in the style of 50s monster movie. It's very much styled on The Blob, and perhaps its 90s equivalent, The Faculty. So this is Ick by Joseph Kahn.
Yep.
I hadn't seen his previous film. You had warned me before I went into it that I may find his style challenging.
Right.
I definitely did.
Yeah.
It's an interesting premise. I do love the premise. So the town has been invaded by something that they colloquially call the ick. It's sort of like mold that sometimes grows into like tentacled splodges of almost, well, it's organic. It's not quite a plant, not quite an animal. It's just sort of there.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to move, doesn't seem to react to people particularly. So everyone has just become apathetic towards it and forgotten it. In fact, you're spanning, I think, about 10 years.
I think 20.
20. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're
That's
forgetting
right.
we're getting all the 2000s
Yes,
music.
it's the 2000s nostalgia. So you're introduced to Hank, played by Brandon Routh. Is it him in the 20 years ago segment being de-aged digitally, or is it another actor?
Oh, it's not digitally de-aged. It's just a terrible, terrible wig.
Oh, it's a frightful wig. I knew that.
I mean,
yeah.
period accurate, but horrifying
Yes.
to look at now.
Yeah, it's sort of sitting on his head like a fire hazard. It's quite impressive. So Hank was the jock.
Yeah.
He had his whole life ahead of him, scholarship and fame and fortune, but unfortunately...
Cheerleader girlfriend.
Yeah, played by Mina Suvari. It's lovely to see her in something again. And unfortunately, the ick trips him up.
Yes.
On a crucial play, and he breaks his leg in about 86 different places by the look of it, and that completely changes the direction of his life. He loses the cheerleader girlfriend, and he ends up a school teacher trapped in his hometown. And he has a new student who is the daughter of his head cheerleader girlfriend from his high school days.
Yep.
Grace, who may or may not be his.
Yeah, so the film is very interested in exploring the potential father-daughter relationship between these characters, but also the ick has begun making moves. So we learned that it has entered into a new phase in which it is rapidly beginning to consume all kinds of living creatures. So the town effectively comes under attack by the ick, and people have to fight to save themselves. Or you would think this is what they would do, but the film is also very interested in satirizing people's ambivalent responses. So we're actually lampooning, I would say, both the left and the right quite strongly in this movie. So there's this one fantastic scene after a bunch of teenagers have been killed at a house party where the town has come together at the most important establishment in town, which is a play on a Walmart. And they're told by the army that they need to stay inside. They need to barricade the doors, stock up on supplies, do not go outside, absolutely do not go to the prom. And all of the residents just reject this. And we start throwing around words like crisis actors and, don't infringe on my rights, we'll sue you and so on. And it's such an outlandish, but also very familiar response. I just can't help but laugh.
Oh, yeah, it's very good. So you have all of the sort of flag-waving types and the rejection of specialists and experts.
Yes.
So you have an authority figure saying, no, this is what this situation is, please follow these guidelines. And you have somebody else edging up to the microphone saying, yes, but you might be this and have these credentials, but isn't it great that all of us can have an opinion? And her response is, no.
No.
It really isn't. It really isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
And we even have a wonderful lampooning of the scene where the town science teacher, which is Hank, suggests what could be a solution for destroying the ick. And that is pretty harshly satirized and lampooned by the official figure who points out, yeah,
we figured that out
we
first
figured
thing.
that out. Yeah, that was our first guess. Thanks very much.
Yeah. And for me, this worked a lot better. I think in part because I am familiar with Joseph Kahn's previous films. So if folks have seen Bodied, or more appropriately, the other detention that I mentioned earlier in this episode. So this one is from 2011. It stars Josh Hutcherson. Very similar kind of energy. So I explained this to Conrad that I think if you're being generous, you could call this kinetic. And if you're not being generous, you would call it manic. Joseph Kahn does have a background in music videos, and he has very much carried over that sense of style to his feature films. So you are running at 11 the entire film, and that can get really exhausting. So I think these moments of really successful satire or comedy, they land well, but then there's no respite. There's no moments of calm for you to even just appreciate the kind of witticisms that the movie has, because it is go, go, go the entire time.
Yeah, and for me, it completely undermined the delivery. I thought it was a very, very funny script.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the kind of impact that Joss Whedon had with his Buffy-style dialogue, particularly with Grace, who we should mention, played by Melina Weissman, who is so funny.
Yeah, folks may recognize her from the Netflix version of a series of unfortunate events. She played Violet.
Yeah, very different role.
Very different. She was so funny in this film, like very sardonic. You're right. The Joss Whedon comparison is so apt because she is incredibly acerbic. She's very smart, except when the script doesn't want her to be smart, and then she's up necking with her clearly terrible boyfriend on the bluff after the ick has killed half of her classmates. For no apparent reason, she is completely confident just being out with this junior sociopath.
Yeah, it's very peculiar because you feel as though the movie has reached a crisis point with the ick attacking the town.
Yes.
And then they just take their foot off the gas and don't do anything, which is okay for the joke after the sort of town gathering together scene.
Yes. Yeah.
But it sort of deflates the forward momentum of the movie until it then goes for a second climax.
Yeah.
Which is just so impossible to follow and so tedious at the same time. Yeah, the style I found very difficult. It undermined what I thought was a very witty script because nothing was given the comedic timing to land. Nothing was given a moment to breathe, to emotionally land either, because you try to develop the father-daughter relationship, which you could tell with the performers could really work.
Yeah, they were doing their best. The problem is that the characters don't act like people. They're either very shallow, one-dimensional. They're verging on caricatures. I would say even our main leads don't behave like real people in a crisis. And you're right, it does sometimes work for the joke, but it doesn't work to help create stakes or emotional investment. I was so checked out in the climax of this film because it was so obvious we were not going to kill anyone important, but we are very prepared to kill every red shirt on screen.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other issue I had is we actually have a clip of the Chuck Russell Blob from 1988 or 86. And, you know, it's a nice reference. It acknowledges that we know what this film is playing off of. But the ick itself is CGI. And it looks like CGI. It is.
Yeah, it looks like cheap CGI.
It does not look good. And sometimes it looks interesting the way it moves. I particularly like how it bubbles when it creeps under, doors and around windows and that kind of stuff. But especially in the end, when the ick has become this gargantuan town devouring blob, it looks like the worst Marvel CGI that you've seen. And I honestly just completely tuned out of the ending because it didn't matter. None of it mattered, and it didn't look good.
No, it didn't. It's a shame because I think there is a really great script there.
Yeah.
With a bit of fine-tuning and a different directorial approach, I think it could have been something. You had the Blob in the 50s, the Great Blob in the 80s, the Faculty in the 90s.
Yeah.
You could have had this for a new generation, and maybe I'm just too old. Maybe this will land perfectly, and this is hilarious, and I'm just too old to be able to follow it along and appreciate it. But
yeah, it definitely has a youthful energy to it that maybe we have grown out of. I would say, folks, if you're a fan of Kahn's detention film, this is probably going to play reasonably well because they do feel very similar. But I guess the only other reason I would really say seek this out, I mean, Brandon Routh is great. It's nice to see him get a nice starring role again. But the other reason is the soundtrack, because as you said, Conrad, this is a throwback to the 2000s. So if you have been missing Stacy's Mom or songs by Creed, this is the soundtrack of our youth.
yes. In fact, the screening that I was in, which was a press screening, so not a public screening, there was no laughter whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
I appreciated all of the jokes, but I was just sort of smiling to myself or sort of breathing through my nose. I wasn't laughing out loud. The only time that people in the audience were laughing were when certain tracks started on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it really was sort of a throwback. Like, oh God, I haven't thought about Stacey's mom for 20 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that, a lot of recognition laughter. But other than that, the jokes didn't land at all.
Oh, it's so interesting. Yeah, because I was in a P&I screening as well, and it was a little more silent than I think I would have cared for. I now wonder what the experience would have been like, because this is a Midnight Madness film. So
Right.
I wonder if it would play better with an energetic, appreciative audience.
Yeah, may well do. But it was a miss for me, this one. I enjoyed elements, I appreciated aspects of it, but it was a miss, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. That's another 4 films, 4 horror films that I've seen while I'm here. I do have a few more that I am due to see.
Okay.
Is there anything left that you're looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, so there's one remaining Midnight Madness film that I'm quite excited to see. It's a low budget, almost local found footage film called It Doesn't Get Any Better Than This. And I've heard from multiple people that it's actually quite good and quite effective at what it does. So I don't really know any of the details. I was just recommended, nay, ordered to go and check it out by a couple of folks. So I'm eager to see if it lives up to expectations.
Yeah, I'm down to see that one too. I'm also seeing Steven Soderbergh's Presence.
Oh, okay. I have seen that one.
Okay.
I saw it with a friend of mine who has seen some of his other ventures into soft horror, I'm going to say. So if you've seen Unsane, it's not dissimilar to that. But I would describe Presence as something more of an exercise than a successful film.
Okay. It's a ghost story, but from the perspective of the ghost, as I understand it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm also going to see Mike Flanagan's new Stephen King adaptation.
Ah, yes. Okay.
I saw Stephen King, actually.
Yes, he was here, which is apparently very rare. He doesn't leave Maine very often. So
It was ridiculous. I was just wandering through Scotiabank and I thought to myself, oh, that elderly gentleman looks like Stephen King.
and it was.
And I walked past him and thought, oh, no, actually, it was him.
It is him. Yeah.
He was here. Yeah, so he was here to support The Life of Chuck, which, it's not horror, as I understand it. This is more in the vein of Shawshank, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, it should be quite emotionally affecting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm up for that. So those are the 3 that I'm looking forward to.
Not the Sarah Paulson film?
That is on my list, but you haven't really gotten me excited about that one.
No, yes. Unfortunately, just before we recorded this, I saw the new film Hold Your Breath, which is out on Hulu here in North America in early October. It's a bit of a period film where Sarah Paulson plays a mother whose husband has left to go and find work during the Depression, and she's there, manning the Western frontier. And there is a threatening figure who appears and says that he's been sent to check on her on behalf of her husband, and he can't entirely be trusted. But also, we're running low on resources. And also, she hasn't been sleeping well. And the last time she didn't sleep, bad things happened. So it's very much a paranoid, is she losing her mind? Is she being threatened from external forces? You know where this is going, and I think the problem that I had with the film is that I knew where it was going about 5 minutes in, and then I had to watch the remaining hour and a half.
Yeah, it's still on my list.
Okay, yep.
And it's not costing me anything.
No,
so
and it's Sarah Paulson, and she delivers a good performance, even if the film itself is not inherently very exciting.
So a couple more ghost movies and a found footage. So it should be fun.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll be back again with our TIFF coverage. Thanks, Joe, so much for joining me on these and showing me around town.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad to have finally met you in person and also get to experience the festival with you.
Yeah. Where can people follow you and find out more of what you've seen here?
Yeah, if you want to read my attempts to convey some of this in written form, you could follow me at B Stole My Remote, and that's the letter B. And I've published a couple of reviews on these films as well.
Do check it out. Okay. Bye for now, everyone.